Thank you again for joining today's webinar, Navigating Mergers with CRM Technology. My name is Andrew Ladwig, Director of Business Development here at Wealthbox. I work with our custodial partners, broker-dealer partners, our integration partners, as well as our consultant friends. And today I am really excited to be touching on a topic that comes up quite a bit with our team. We are joined today by Cameo Roberson of AtlasPark Consulting. Cameo, we'd love to get a little sense of your background before we get things kicked off here.
Yes, happy to. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on when you're watching this recording. It's great to be here with Andrew and the Wealthbox team. I'm Cameo Roberson. And after spending 2 decades working in the wealth management space for RIAs based in the San Francisco Bay Area, I launched AtlasPark Consulting as a coaching and operations strategy agency that transforms operational challenges into seven-figure growth for independent RIAs and teams. Really excited to be here today and to share with you navigating mergers with CRM technology, what's behind it, what's in between it, and how can you be successful at it.
And operationally, how does it all work, right?
Absolutely.
And with that, Cameo, I will pass things over to you. But we'd love to hear a little bit more about defining mergers and acquisitions. What does it actually mean to today's advisors and advisory firms? And what does that look like moving forward? I know you've got some statistics on that end.
Yeah, I do. Happy to. Let's talk about it. So when it comes to RIA mergers and acquisitions, right? Buzzword we hear in the industry, it's happening all around us, but what does it actually mean? So when two or more practices are coming together to form a single company is when a merger is happening. Think of two independent practices who want to form a single company, bridge the gap, figure out how they can get more done together versus an acquisition, meaning an inorganic growth strategy where one company purchases another company to really gain control over that company. And we see a lot of this happening in our space for a variety of reasons. And it's something that not only happens often, but advisors really need to be prepared post-transaction of how to have a successful merger and or acquisition.
With that in mind, Cameo, what are some of the reasonings behind that you're seeing in the firms that you're working with for those mergers and acquisitions? What are some of the inflection points that lead to that?
Yeah, the biggest thing I see with mergers is so in particular solo practitioners just tired of doing everything themselves, tired of wearing all the hats in their business, making all the decisions, and wanting to have a strategic partner with them to help grow the firm in the way that they want to go. Additionally, I see just wanting to be able to divide and conquer and make sure that the firm is sustainable and being able to have longevity in the industry. Now, when it comes to acquisitions, there's a variety of different reasons why people do that. I'll be talking about a case study today around one firm who saw this as a great growth strategy. And that's what it is. It's a very highly accelerated growth strategy that firms can take advantage of. So as we think about mergers and acquisitions and kind of what's happening in the industry now, you're looking at my slide here, and research from Cerulli and Associates estimates that over 106,000 advisors will retire in the next decade, representing nearly 37% of industry advisor headcount. Now, that's a lot of advisors who are going to be retiring, and that's a lot of money in motion. And among those retiring advisors in the next 10 years, about 27,000, over 27,000, don't have a succession plan. And while many of them are aware of the need for succession planning, whether it's an internal or external sale, really poses a hurdle. And this is something that I hear often from my colleagues in the industry and other professionals that I work with. It's we're not planning for succession, which is a pain point in itself, but time doesn't stop for anyone. So then the question is there actually an opportunity for advisors who have a much longer retirement timeline to take advantage of a potential acquisition strategy here. And that's where the opportunity really lies. So I mentioned the money in motion is about 2.4 trillion in assets that presents really a pathway to win assets and continue to serve clients. So my question to you watching today is this an opportunity for your firm to consider? Have you thought about how you're going to grow your firm past today? And what things should you be prepared for if you decide to go in that path? Another thing I'll mention is if this poses an opportunity, what are you doing today to get in front of some of these advisors who will be retiring, who don't have a succession plan, to really be proactive in your growth strategy? And we'll talk a little bit more around things that you can consider as we go along in this presentation. So some additional stats, because we're financial professionals and we love stats. So there's over 3 billion of growth opportunity that exists for RIA acquirers, those among retirements, breakaways, and growth challenged RIAs. So the 2.4 trillion figure that I mentioned is current, and you're looking at assets from 2022. So the advisor retirement assets are continuing to grow over time, presenting an opportunity for advisors to use that inorganic growth strategy and potentially purchase books from retiring advisors. And those opportunities may be a lot closer than you think. Think of your current network. You may be a part of different industry organizations, people in your business groups in terms of getting opportunities to get in front of those advisors. So all of these stats, all of this information from Cerulli and Associates really gives us a baseline around the growth opportunities, what's happening. M&A activity is still very high, and how you as a growing advisor should think about planning for the pre-merger or the pre-acquisition, and then what happens after, in particularly operationally in that space.
And Cameo, on that
Yeah.
note, one of the ironic things is that many of the advisors and firms that are looking to go out and merge with other firms, potentially acquire them, many times they've been independent for years, if not decades, right? So
Right.
what actually goes into that thought process, especially for that firm they've run on their own, they've done things their own way for potentially decades at a time, right?
Absolutely. It's definitely a mindset shift when you've been doing everything yourself and you've been calling all the shots and not having to answer to anyone. It becomes a mindset shift when you think about merging your practice with someone else. I have a client that I'm working with now who originally started out as a solo practitioner back in 2018, but over the course of time, as we've worked together, she's grown her practice, she's identified her niche client base. She's decided how she wants to continue to grow the firm. An opportunity to partner developed in the last 12 months. And so that was a mindset shift that we talked about. And I let her know when you do decide to merge with another firm, it's like getting married, and you want to make sure that you do a lot of due diligence and understand your new partner and how they think, what are some of their growth objectives, how do they manage their current practice, what kind of leader are they? How do they want to continue to show up in the firm? And it's not a one and done conversation. It's something that should happen over the course of time. But in the case of my client, these are things that we talked about, and she's on the road to actually merging her practice, which should happen sometime early 2025. So those are some things to think about kind of pre-transition and pre-merger to help set yourself up for success. So if you are thinking about a merger acquisition, there's the pre-merger, the during the merger acquisition, and then there's the post steps. And in both of these situations, you want to think about your people, your processes, and your technology. People who will be affected. It's more than just the leadership team. Will there be support staff that you'll need to hire, or support staff that you'll actually inherit in a transaction? And we'll talk about what that looks like. You also want to think about your processes. What established systems need to merge and or evolve? In the particular case of my client, we had been working on her operations for a number of years, and she has it running like a well-oiled machine. Well, her business partner saw how she was running her practice and is looking to really adopt her way of doing things instead of trying to recreate the wheel. So if you're thinking about merging with the practice, that's a big area because you don't want to run your firm really in two different paths because you want to make sure that that exceptional client experience is consistent. And that happens when you have clear processes and workflows, which we will absolutely get into a little bit later. And then technology. How will you optimize your Wealthbox CRM pre-merger acquisition, during the events, and then post-event? Wealthbox is your hub, and how are you leveraging it so that you have the right information available at your discretion, your team has the right information, and if you need to convey anything to your clients, you can very easily go into their profile and be able to share the right information with them. I remember when I worked for a $3 billion RIA in the San Francisco Bay Area, before I launched my practice. And one of the things that was really, really clear is how we were to deliver client support and service. So if a team member was out or someone wasn't available or one of the managers was out on vacation, we could very easily pick up the reins because the service was consistent, the process was clear, and we didn't have to worry about giving the wrong information to clients. Now, when it comes to mergers and acquisitions, this is a huge pain point that I see often when it's not handled right and when clients don't get the right information at different points of this journey, and how it can promote future attrition across the board as time goes on. So what are some long-term motivations for mergers? Oftentimes I see wanting to have enhanced operational efficiency and scalability. That's always a buzzword in our industry. Really being able to combine resources, the processes needed for growth, and technology as you continue to move forward. And if you think about you're merging your practice with someone else, there's going to be some cost sharing there. So you're not the only one bearing the burden of the cost when it comes to, enhanced efficiency and scalability in your practice. You may be also able to leverage each other's strengths and expertise, have broader service offerings. You really have opportunities to leverage each other's capabilities in a way that makes sense for the practice. And then increase market reach and brand authority. Two excellent advisors or more coming together and expanding their footprint through collaborative networks, becoming a stronger competitor in the industry. These are all long-term motivations that can be achieved. And when you leverage tools like Wealthbox to manage all of the pieces, it will make your life so much easier as you go through the transition.
And as we go over and look at the long-term motivations for the acquisition side, no matter which side of the table that you're sitting on, we hear all the time that firms that are able to have a really good understanding of their client base, right? Whether it be demographic data, understanding of client segmentation, they're able to sit confidently on whichever side of the table they're on. As we start to look at the long-term motivations for acquisitions, we're definitely looking firms that are looking to acquire other firms are absolutely going to want to dive into the details, which are oftentimes powered by the CRM, hopefully Wealthbox that's in place, right, Cameo?
Right, absolutely, Andrew. It's really the hub and the heart of your practice. If you're not leveraging Wealthbox today to its highest and best use, let this presentation be an opportunity to clean things up. Even if you're not preparing for a merger acquisition today, it really allows you to manage all the moving parts and pieces of your business. And oftentimes, one of the biggest wants or wish list items I see from my clients is we want more efficiency. We want to be better organized. We want to get done more or faster. And by leveraging Wealthbox in its best use for your practice, really will allow you to do that. And we'll talk a little bit about what that could look like for your practice. Now, what are some long-term motivations for acquisitions? The biggest one that I'm seeing, and this is in relationship to it's hard to find good talent. And there's a lot of turnover in our industry for a variety of reasons. And so firms who are looking to acquire other books of business really see this as strategic talent and resource acquisition as well. We know firms can't do everything by themselves. You need teams and you need people to get those things done. And when you find that you can get access to talented advisors, key support staff, or even niche expertise, really turns into a strong motivator for acquisitions. Additionally, acquisitions provide an immediate boost in revenue, increase in firm valuation. You talk about accelerated growth and revenue expansion fast because of that book of business coming over pretty much ready to roll and you being able to service them well so that they stay with your practice is also a very important aspect to think about. And then diversification of your client portfolio. Really, if you're thinking about diversifying your client base, maybe getting access to a different set of clients is something to think about, and really tapping into different client profiles. So there's a lot of motivations and things. These are just three of the top ones that I've discovered in working with clients and talking with colleagues, but they come with risk. And those are the things that we're going to cover and how you can really leverage Wealthbox to manage all the moving parts and pieces. So when a merger acquisition happens, right, there's the transaction side. We understand that. That's probably where people get the most excited. But what happens after the dust settles? Operationally, how will these merged practices or acquired practices continue to operate? And I go back to the people, the processes, the technology, because these are really the core pieces that are going to help you make sure that operationally you continue to move forward in a strong fashion. So when it comes to your people, acquisitions, who may not have a job now because you don't need 3 client service managers. You don't need, 8 support professionals. So you want to think about who's going to be affected here and think about that in advance of the merger or the acquisition. Or you may determine, who do I need to hire? Maybe you've discovered that you acquire different books of business, but the support professionals may not have been the best in that particular role. And you're realizing, okay, I'm going to need to hire someone with a higher skill set. Or maybe you realize you need to hire a junior advisor or a paraplanner to actually support the direction that you want to take your practice in. The next one is processes, workflows. I know it's one of those buzzwords that we all get excited about, but really, what established systems do you need to evolve, right, after the dust settles? You don't want to have 2 ways of delivering or creating client financial plans. You don't want to have multiple ways of opening up new accounts at the custodian. You want to have a very clear and succinct process, because at the end of the day, you don't want this transaction to bring down the operations and then bring down the quality of the service that you're providing to your clients. Oftentimes, I see when processes are not established the way they need to, NIGOs go up, not in good order items, which most advisors hate. If you take the time to think about how you can evolve your processes to then cut down on some of those NIGO activities, and in particular, keeping your processes updated in Wealthbox so that everyone across the organization knows what to do and how to do it. And then technology. How will you optimize your CRM in either one of these transfers? And what kind of information do you need on the front end after the transaction has settled? What do you need during the transition? Because that's a part of it too. Nothing happens overnight. And then what do you need post-transaction to make sure that your client service standards remain high, clients remain in touch with what's going on throughout the transfer, and then making sure that your team knows as well. So let's talk a little bit about the actual impact of a merger or an acquisition, right? And there's 3 levels to this. There's the advisor directly, there's the teams of support, and then there's the client impact. So when it comes to the advisor impact, it's really the current leadership and how you want to grow your firm, how you want to manage your operations, what's the long-term vision, and being very clear about this. Now, I'll mention when it comes to acquisitions, and I have a case study I'll share with you, oftentimes you're not just inheriting teams, you're not just inheriting clients, but you may also be inheriting retiring advisors. You just purchased their books, and they're not going to leave immediately. At least I hope they don't, because they can then help in the transition from the old guard to the new guard. Now, when it comes to the team's impact, inherited staff, I mentioned that earlier. How will their roles change? Will someone not have a job after a certain amount of time? Are there duplicate roles? So you want to think about these things in advance of the actual transaction happening. And then, of course, the client impact. You know, you have your existing clients who you've been working with and want to continue to work with to a high degree and deliver that exceptional service. How will new clients coming into your fold impact your existing service model? Are you primed to continue to serve both groups well? Are you confident in your ability to give everyone what they need at every given point in this transfer? And the more you leverage Wealthbox on the front end, keeping information clear, concise, you'll be able to pull information as needed in sharing it with your clients so that they feel confident that this acquisition is not going to impact them negatively. So let's talk a little bit about some key retention strategies for those three groups of people. And these are things that you can think about on the front end when it comes to the lead advisors. Thinking about your client concerns proactively, not waiting for the shoe to drop, but actually thinking about how some of your long-term clients will feel about your firm growing. On the front end, I'm sure they'll be very happy. But on the back end, they may be wondering if their relationship with you is going to change, who they're going to be reporting to. Will our meeting cadence change? You want to think about all these things on the front end. So when the questions come up and you start to have the meetings with clients around how the firm is growing, you can address those concerns proactively. What I would also do is have their client concerns documented in their client profile in Wealthbox, right? Because these are things that you can, over the course of time, bring up maybe a year post acquisition and say, hey, prior to this, we talked about some of these things that were concerns of yours. Were we able to address them? You will be seen as someone who's thoughtful and careful if you're able to remember their concerns, address them proactively, and then a year later, bring it back up and say, hey, were we able to meet your needs? Now, when it comes to teams, clarity of roles is really key here. There's a lot of turnover in our profession. And one of the ways that I see is because there is no real career path for a lot of our support staff beyond the lead advisors or the support advisors. If you have a real clear picture of how the team is going to fit into this new firm with these additional clients, and if they feel confident that they can continue to serve at a high level, you then improve your retention of those people long term. The rails fall off when we don't think about our people. We assume that they know they're important. We assume that they know their role in this new environment and not really take the time to give them the support that they need.
And Cameo, one of the things that we see all the time for growing firms is using the CRM as that hub, but more specifically, having contact roles in there, right? So be it lead advisor, junior advisor, client service associate, actually having those in the CRM. So for instance, when someone takes a call, creates a follow-up task, that can flow directly to the right person. As a firm may grow from one to three or four lead advisors, having those contact roles in your CRM as part of that clean data can be super helpful as you're managing that transition.
Yeah, that's a great point, Andrew. And even being able to assign tasks and different workflows to certain team members if their information is in there. It just makes it very clean. And if someone is ever out, and I see this often, someone's on vacation or even someone has left the firm, another team member can step in and pick up the reins and be able to service that client at that same level as that previous associate. Those are key things that will allow you to maintain the consistent service across the board by really leveraging the true functionality of Wealthbox and your CRM and making sure that you build it out to its highest and best use. So getting those custom features in place, getting those areas that are really going to work for your team and for your clients. And when it comes to clients, retention strategies. So mergers and acquisitions, there's always an opportunity for attrition, right? Clients may feel like, you know what, this new entity is not really a good fit for me. So they may decide to move elsewhere. So what you want to think about is over communicate at every step of this evolution, right? Pre, during, and post. Maintaining trust and transparency across the board so that your clients know that you heard them and you're addressing their needs very proactively. These are things that will allow you to build even stronger relationships with your existing clients. And guess what? Your new clients that you just acquired, they don't know you yet. And so they're watching you very closely. Here's an opportunity to be collaborative in building stronger relationships with them too, so that they stay with you and they feel well served as well.
And as we're rolling into a case study here, we've had a couple good questions come in the Q&A section. We'll get to those on the back end of the conversation here today. But Cameo, I know you've got a real life situation from a merger that you've worked with. Let's dive in.
I do. So this was a client that I worked with, a hybrid SEC registered firm on the East Coast. And this was a situation where the acquisition was strained really due to poor planning. So the firm grew 2x in 3 years by purchasing books of business. And there was one owner, lead financial advisor, two associate FAs, three support staff that were inherited from the acquisitions, three retiring advisors as a part of the bunch that had about a 12-month will stay with you window. One key retiring support professional that had been with the original owner for about 20 years. And the question was, do we need a new CSA? So I give all those details to communicate kind of what success looked like for them at the time when they came to me. Is they really wanted to understand how to reorganize their staff, systems, and processes, understanding the best role for a new junior FA that they were recruiting, and then incorporate a new practice that they're acquiring in 6 months. So these were some of their milestones. Now let's get into the details a little bit more. So when we started this engagement, there were unclear roles and responsibilities present. No one had a job description, so we had to get that situated first. There were also role changes post-acquisition, three inherited support staff professionals who were all working in silos. They had been supporting the retiring advisors for a number of years, excellent at what they did, but had a way of doing things and weren't so excited to potentially do things differently. There was also the client transition plan. So if the retiring FAs are going to be around for the next year, who's going to take the lead on the new engagements? So we had to talk about what the new junior advisor's role would be and determine that they actually didn't need a new CSA, they needed a new advisor. So then the search goes, okay, well, how do we find this person? Well, they found someone, but it was reactive hiring. And they made a poor fit hire and had to rehire months later at an additional cost. I mentioned the siloed teams and the workflows. This is a really big one because each individual support professional was doing the work that they had been accustomed to and weren't too excited to have to now collaborate with each other. That's the honest truth of what happens. And when you can proactively figure out how everyone is going to work together, take that leadership role and really give people insights into how these changes are going to help them do their jobs better, will help with stronger buy-in on the front end. And then the last piece that we were able to do is really clarify their workflows because they now had more clients to serve and more people to now manage, and everyone had a role to play. So we were able to get that clarified. But these were things that they didn't think about. It was the excitement of the acquisition, which is a wonderful thing. But there are operational things that you want to think about to make sure that you can be successful in that acquisition. One of the other things that came up, which was really interesting, is throughout the transition, there wasn't a lot of discussion with the retiring advisors around what they thought would be best. So there was a little bit of animosity present, and I was able to come in and really facilitate stronger conversations between the current leadership and the retiring advisors. We're not kicking them out the door, and we want to think about what they feel could be, a potential success plan and path. But these were things that were all not discussed in advance. And so these are all types of things that can be managed in your Wealthbox CRM when we get into talking about the project details of managing all the moving pieces.
Yeah, let's dive into that. So when you're mitigating that risk, what are you defining up front when you're working with firms, and what can people take away and start to think about?
Yeah, the biggest thing in terms of mitigating risk is how is this activity, how is this event going to affect your clients, right? Because that is your bread and butter. Those are the people that you want to make sure that you're continuing to serve well. So think about how this is going to affect your clients. And then the next piece is really thinking about how this is going to affect your teams. And if you need to reorganize roles, if you need to think about hiring someone, what are all the things that could happen potentially, and making sure that you get these questions and thoughts and ideas documented in the CRM so that you can do some planning around pre-transition, right? Whether it's a merger and acquisition. Because when it comes down to it, if you're able to really plan well, start to mitigate risk, avoid the chaos that we often see happening, and really getting clarity on who, what's happening, when is it happening, where is it happening, how and why. When you have answers to these questions and you're leveraging your CRM to manage the information, so it's not on slips of paper, so it's not just in conversations, but it's in a hub where you can manage that information both short term and long term. So let's talk about some best practices if you're thinking about preparing for a merger or an acquisition. Really being, and I'm going back to the people, processes, and technology. There's a theme here, really having clear roles from leadership as well as team responsibilities. If you're merging with another practice, you both are going to be in a leadership capacity, but who's going to take care of what? Who's going to be responsible for client acquisition? Will you both do it? Is someone going to take the lead on, creating financial plans and delivery? Who's going to be a rainmaker? Who's going to take care of compliance? What are the things that you want to make sure that are clear when it comes to that, as well as your support team? And if you're acquiring other practices, your involvement is going to be a little bit deeper because you have multiple books of business that have been managed a certain way. And if you're the only leader, guess what? You are now going to be taking the brunt of the responsibility unless you decide potentially to bring on a partner or to promote even a junior partner at your current firm. So those are some things to think about. Processes. What steps are teams really bringing to the table? How are they getting done? How do you want things to get done? What steps are currently in place? How do you bridge processes from two firms that are merging or from three or more books of business that you are acquiring? And then how are you documenting and keeping all that information in your CRM? And then building out your CRM or building out Wealthbox and making sure that over the course of time, your team is very clear on how to leverage the tool and being able to get information very quickly. The efficiency and the accuracy goes up significantly when you maintain that hub of data and information at different stages, whether it's pre during or post merger acquisition. It's that hub that you want to become your best friend and really leverage and build out.
And Cameo, one of the things, there was a great question that came in as we're going over to the next slide is if a firm has another CRM, right? If they're acquiring or merging with a firm that has another CRM, our team, we have a full-time team that actually handles what we call data migrations. We can bring over core client data, as I call it, KYC, know your client data, notes, tasks can all be brought over during that data migration. And even if it's two firms that use Wealthbox, you can work with our team to help with that data migration, even internally if you're both Wealthbox users.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And one kind of best practice I will add on that, if you're moving over to Wealthbox and maybe your previous CRM wasn't built out to its highest and best use, take this opportunity to build out Wealthbox. If you're going over to the tool, make the time to learn it, to build it out to your practice needs, leverage the Wealthbox team to do that. It's like the perfect opportunity because then you'll also be able to get trained, if I'm right, Andrew, on the tool and how they can leverage it best.
Absolutely. Get comfortable with it as that transition's happening.
Mhm.
With that in mind, what does that dialogue look like for firms that are making that transition, Cameo?
If they're making the transition from an old CRM over to Wealthbox, what does the dialogue look like?
During a merger and
Oh, yeah.
acquisition, what's that right transition plan look like for them?
Yeah, that right transition plan really has to do with tracking your client work, making sure that you have all the moving pieces in order, having an open dialogue with your support team, making sure that you have a chance to do some training on your new systems. Cross training is also great when you have existing staff that will continue on and maybe they have an opportunity to train the new staff. Make sure you're leading the way, right? This is your practice. This is your business, and your teams are going to be looking to you for direction and guidance. And don't assume that they know everything that should be happening, and really communicate to them around what's happening at each step, their role in the transition, and how they can support everyone being successful. And then with your clients, be realistic around the best fit transition schedule. With the case study I just shared with you, it was probably about a year and a half after the first practices had been purchased. There was no clear transition plan communicated to the clients. Clients didn't know who was going to be their lead advisor. And it was one of those, we didn't do it on purpose, but there's so many other things going on that we didn't get to that conversation. So think about what that transition schedule looks like ahead of time so that you can communicate to your clients and let them know what they can expect. And then what happens around managing your transition plan in Wealthbox? And the theme here is people, process, and technology, really understanding what work needs to happen from your team, who will be responsible for what aspects of the transition, figuring out your processes in advance. Don't wing this. You want to think about what needs to happen in advance so that you avoid any errors or mistakes happening post transition. And then technology, leveraging Wealthbox to track client work and communication as the transitions are happening, and really allowing for enhanced team collaboration. People feel like they're a part of this plan. They're not just the ones doing the work, but they've actually had a say in how things should happen. You'll be surprised. Your support professionals who are in the trenches doing the work could have some great ideas to help mitigate any issues and help things go as smoothly as possible. Because there's a lot of moving pieces going on here. Now, what are some of the benefits of using a CRM to maintain client trust and communication during transitions, whether they're mergers or acquisitions? It's really that centralized client data and communication. I shared an article recently around how if you're able to track all of the things that you've been sharing with clients over time, that investment recommendation that you talked about a year and a half ago, capture that and being able to bring that up in conversation with clients is powerful because they'll say, my goodness, you remember that? Absolutely. in our client communications. It's in our database. Having automated reminders and task management, those day-to-day things that we do all the time and not having to do them manually by having it automated is great. Having enhanced transparency and record keeping. This is great for teams and clients. And if you're ever in the position where you get audited, you have it all there. And you can produce reports and information that the auditors are asking for with ease, cutting down on stress and frustration of where is this information? I don't know where to find it, or your teams don't know where to find it. These are all great benefits. And then having streamlined workflows for efficient issue resolution, making sure those processes are clear. I often tell my clients and other colleagues, in the absence of process, people make things up. When you use your CRM and really document those workflows, you avoid people making things up in the process. Now, as we get ready to wrap things up for today, we're going to talk about how to leverage Wealthbox to maintain efficiency during mergers and acquisitions. So, clarify transition tasks, having clean client contact information, making sure that you're using projects to manage operational changes. And it's clear around timelines of when things should be happening so that you can proactively follow up. And leveraging files to keep track of documents. This is really big because when you're merging a practice or when you're acquiring, there's new data, there's new files, there's new information that you want to be able to capture and store appropriately. Think about, cost basis information. That's a big one when you're acquiring firms. You want to be able to, pull up that information in your own database if you're not able to get it from the custodian. So part one, setting up a transition plan using Wealthbox. So really leveraging the task area of the tool and really identifying what needs to be done. And you can then categorize these by, pre-transition, during transition, and post-transition steps, and being able to assign these particular things to teams. It's a clean place where you can store all the things that need to be happening and avoid having to recreate the wheel somewhere else or missing steps and then having to go back and do something because you missed it the first time. So if this is an area that you're currently using in Wealthbox, even if you're not planning a transition now, this is a great way to keep track of a firm-specific task as well as client-specific tasks and having a central database of what needs to happen, when it needs to happen, and then accountability, right? It's clearly in the tool. And so there are multiple benefits that you can use from the task perspective. And then workflows, the workflow. How will those tasks get done? I mentioned earlier, absence of process, people make things up. If you have workflows that are documented here in Wealthbox, then it's very clear around what's happening with the client engagement. Is this a discovery meeting? Is this a financial planning meeting? Because there's meetings that you'll have on the front end of the transition to tell your clients what's happening. And then there'll be meetings on the back end of the transition to tell them what's happening or what's coming up, and then figuring out if you need to even change their meeting cadence or schedule. Having those workflows in place, whatever those deliverables are, is just going to make your life so much easier.
In Cameo, one thing I'll
Yeah.
note on workflows, we get a lot of questions about what can be a workflow. Very simple way for those that have worked in an office, if you remember those old manila folders that you used to sign a name on, you walk over to someone's desk. If you have a process in your office that happens, I've heard it said more than 3 times consistently, and it contains multiple people that you used to walk that manila folder over to, that's a workflow. And as a reminder for those listening, Wealthbox has built out a workflow template library, so you don't have to worry about that first step. As we're looking at here, we've got 10 pre-built workflows that you can actually take, edit, customize, make your own, because oftentimes that first step of building them out could be the toughest.
Mhm.
Definitely check out our workflow template library. But let's talk a little bit about projects as well, Cameo.
Yeah, projects, very close to my heart because I do have a certificate in project management. Is how do you manage everything? Tasks, workflows. all the moving parts and pieces. If you're able to set up a transition project board, pre-transition, during the transition, post-transition, here's where you can store all those particular steps and have very clear understanding of what's happening. You'll also be able to proactively follow up on things that may have stalled out or maybe you're waiting on information for. And it's just a very clean way to then be able to share with your clients. Where are we in this transition? How will service be affected during these times? Again, that proactive communication with your clients, with your teams, and making sure that all the pieces that need to be managed are managed in one central location in Wealthbox that the entire team can access whenever it's needed, because we know sometimes we get those emails early morning or late at night, clients asking questions, what's going on? Where are we? How is this happening? Being able to go into one tool creates so much peace of mind for everyone across the board and really allows the transition to happen in a very strong way.
And as you're thinking about projects, Cameo, you mentioned this briefly, they could be external, right? As we've got up
Yeah,
here on the screen, it could be an in-person event, making sure, did we get the venue booked? Is the food booked? Is the speaker ready? Is their travel good? All of that can be done through projects. The other side, and a lot of what we're speaking to here when a firm may be merging or acquiring another firm, are more of those internal projects, right? It could be physically
correct.
moving offices. It could be making sure that a new employee has all of their licenses moved over, right? Has all of their equipment ready to go. So again, thinking about utilizing projects both for internally, making sure things get done, easy spot to check where things are at. And then externally, thinking about events, things that are client facing, things that are more outward facing, maybe an advertising campaign that the firm's doing. Those can all be tracked here as well.
Absolutely. That's a great point, Andrew. And you can get very granular because when you're merging firms and or acquiring different practices, I'd recommend having a project board for how you're going to handle your tech, right? There's going to be duplicate pieces of tech across the board. Use this project board to determine what you got and then evaluate any changes that you may need to do in the process and having it in one central place.
Great. And with that, as we button things up here, for those of you that may not have seen Wealthbox in action, may be curious about, again, potential data migrations, bringing firms together, maybe workflows, how you can actually utilize those within your practice or projects, please reach out to our team at wealthbox.com or directly at sales@wealthbox.com. We'd be happy to connect with you. Cameo, what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you if they've got any questions about how you're working with firms and some of the opportunities there?
Absolutely. A couple of ways you can get in touch with me. You can send me an email at admin@atlasparkco.com. You can also find me across social, LinkedIn, with the hashtag, or actually with Atlas Park Co. You can search for me, Cameo Roberson, or search for Atlas Park. Happy to chat with anyone who is experiencing or thinking about doing a merger acquisition and what you need to do to be prepared for that.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining out there. Cameo, we appreciate the partnership and we look forward to working
Absolutely.
together in the future. Have a great
Thank
rest
you
of
so
the
much,
afternoon.
Andrew. Thanks, everyone.
All right. See ya.